DNA testing that the pretenders are trying to do, which is trying to downplay how the DNA system works and how they use how they tightly knit their samples in order to get the haplogroups properly right, and are just trying to poke holes in something that really does work. It doesn't make any sense to me because it's used daily. Autosomal. Anytime when they're doing DNA testing for crimes, they're going to look at the autosomal statistics, and this is how they're catching people. They're looking at the people. If someone puts in their DNA information into a pool, all right, and this is how they've been able to catch and close a lot of cold cases, is through autosomal statistics. So how are you going to try to poke holes in DNA and how they get their DNA samples when we have evidence of it working already? It just shows that you don't understand autosomal statistics. And that's the biggest issue that I had with those who I consider to be allies, but at the same time are being anti-science themselves because they just want to simply win an argument. And that's problematic for me. The idea is that, and my concern with Notorious BJP going at them and everything else is that there are things that she's above water on that they're below water on educationally. And everything is lost because inevitably the argument or discussion is lost because somebody doesn't understand something and they won't admit that they don't understand certain information. All right, it was asked 3 times inside of the conversation, 2 times in the conversation when Notorious was breaking it down, and you could tell that I'm sitting here watching and listening, and you could tell that they did not understand autosomal statistics when they were trying to say that East Eurasian DNA is 8.7%, which means it goes back 30 to 40,000 years ago, when autosomal statistics only goes back 150 to 200 years through commercial testing. You see, it's things like that that don't make sense, that they can't explain, and then you try to say, look, they want to have a debate against me just to save face. And I'm like, the only problem with that is that the biggest loser in that whole thing will be not only the discussion, but the science behind it. Because you're not, even if you think you're going to win me by having the gift of gab, at the very end of the day, if you do win, you just misinformed a bunch of people, okay, about something that you don't understand. That's very dangerous. That's the problem. So we shouldn't have discussions and debates about things that are scientific if you're not on par with Notorious BJP. If you're not there, and that's the reason why I made those posts and those joke posts and things like that out of the admiration for how BJP does a great job holding all 3 guys that are trying to find any way they can to clip you up, if you will, and to try to use your words against you. I have respect for those guys, but then they lost it because at that point, when you try to tell me what to do, I'm not with you. I'm my own man. I do what I think is right. I feel like I'm a science literate guy, and I would rather defend that than defend just simply saving face for the sake of not winning an argument.
No, and I appreciate that. And you're right. Like, what got lost in translation is how actual haplogroups work. And because that wasn't put out appropriately, I'm now seeing now you got people running to go do their mtDNA tests, right? And there are going to be people that are going to connect to ABCD and and they're of African descent, because there is a Native person somewhere in their line that was, Native, right? And it's only showing one line. It's not showing every single matrilineal line in your family tree. They forget that they have more than one matrilineal line. And so when you're only showing one tiny segment, that can be misconstrued, especially when we're talking about ancient DNA. And the haplogroup thing is not to show you who you are. It's not to say that this is where, I mean, it's all it, that's why haplogroups don't have actual, if people notice, that's why haplogroups are based in letters. Haplogroup L, haplogroup A, haplogroup X. We've inferred race onto those haplogroups, but there's a reason why they keep them with letters, not to infer race. It's literally to show that this is at a point in time where people were at, and there was a split that happened here. We can't infer their culture. We can't infer their race. We can't infer their language. We can't infer any of that. And when we start inferring that and saying that they were Asians, they were Africans, they were Europeans, they were Native Americans, when we're talking 50,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, we are in the wrong, because that's not what anybody called themselves. And their cultures were completely different, even from our ancient cultures of 7,000 to 10,000 years ago, right? And so when we infer those things, then it leads to things where now people are like, okay, you want me to go get my haplogroup, and my haplogroup says it's B. Now what? And it's like, well, you can't claim ancient people to make you Native American, because that's not how it works, because that's a common ancestor. And, well, no, we're genetically linked. And that's where they're not understanding. Like me and my son, and I think I gave this example, me and my son, if he marries somebody who's not Native American, right, his daughter is going to have their haplogroup, not my haplogroup. Because if his wife is European or African, right, his daughter, while still Native American, while still my descendant, my grandchild, is not going to have my mitochondrial DNA, because he can't pass that down. Only his wife can. So whatever his wife is what's going to be passed down to her. And that's even if she has like nothing but Europeans or nothing but Africans in her line, right? And so I am not genetically connected through mitochondrial DNA to my granddaughter. That does not make her not my granddaughter. And that's what they're not understanding, is that there are these nuances when it comes to genetic ancestry and genealogical ancestry. And if people can't determine and discern the difference between that, the conversation is going to never go anywhere, because they have to understand that
BGP. Say that again. Say that again. Say that part again.
That there is a difference in a genetic connection versus a genealogical connection.
Thank you.
And so when people conflate those two and don't understand what the term ancestry and descendancy means, it means something different in archaeology than what it means in genetics, than what it means in anthropology, than what it means to historians, right? There's actual several different versions of this meaning. And I've even shown papers of this where they've actually, science has come together and said, this is a problem and we need to have a more consistent definition for these terms, because it is confusing the layman.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
So like I said, my granddaughter will not be, unless my son marries a Native woman, my granddaughter is not going to have my mitochondrial DNA. She's not going to be linked to me genetically through mitochondrial DNA. But genealogically, that's still my granddaughter. And autosomally, she's still linked to me. She's just not linked to me through mitochondrial. She's linked to me through autosomal. So those are the nuances that people fail to recognize when they don't truly understand the entirety of what DNA is. I'm not a geneticist. I don't claim to be, but I have enough foundation to understand and break down the science. Now, when you bring me a study and you ask me about what all the equations are and all of that stuff, I'll back out. I don't know. That's not my realm. I'm not a geneticist. But the foundation of what DNA is, how it works, and those things, I know. I'm really good at that part. I have that foundation. And had we been able to actually have a conversation and been like, hey, I see where your point is, but listen to where I'm coming from on this. This is how these things can be taken differently. And so if you don't recognize those nuances, your argument is going to fall apart, even with the pretendians. And they're going to take what you guys say and now they're running with it. Now we're all Asians again. Now if their mtDNA connects to native quote unquote native haplogroup, now that's what makes them native, and it makes them ancient because they're connected to ancient natives. So they definitely are here and been here. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where the dangerous part comes in. That's what they were not getting, because there are YT people on this app that were claiming to be native. And I was like, oh, okay, I do that with everybody. Oh, okay, cool. And they're like, yeah, I found it through my DNA. Okay, cool. I found out that they were doing that shit. They were claiming Kenwick Man and Sick Boy because their DNA goes all the way to that because it connect to a haplogroup. That's A, right? Or B.
Right.
Well, you could have people in Europe who have never set foot in the Americas be haplogroup A. You could have people in the Polynesian Islands that have haplogroup A who've never been to the Americas. You're going to tell them that they are descendants of Native Americans, ancient Native Americans? No.
No.
But they could claim it if that's the realm that you're going to go down. And when you keep telling people that just do your haplogroup, that'll tell you where you're from. That's not how it works.
Absolutely, especially with the Kennewick man. I had to learn myself basically that busts are not really based on any type of scientific study. They're a matter of interpretation. It's the genetics inside of the bones, inside of those things that they're able to find. The raw material to do the DNA for the Kennewick man. That's more important than the bust. The bust can be an interpretation by somebody who says, "Okay, I figured it looked like this." The busts are not scientific, are scientifically accurate.
Right. Welcome, Eagle Star. You came up. Did you want to add anything? And then, I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce your name at the bottom. You can go after Eagle Star when he's done. Oh, he went on pause. Who said white people do it? Because what do we let white people do? Go ahead. I'm sorry, the person at the bottom, what's your name?
Ganasqueta.
Oh, nice to meet you. What would you like to add?
I was just listening in to people and the things they say. Sometimes I just do this, give a real Native American perspective and view on things because a lot of people don't really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
I see all these lies with pretendians arguing with one another and they never show any proof of anything. Hey, I came from a Nanseman father and a Meherrin Tuscarora mother. I don't need DNA. I was born enrolled. And I see all this stuff all the time and I sit and wonder, why are you involved in Native issues in the first place?
well, there's more nuanced history to that. Also, you forget there are detribalized people, which is where you get some pretendians kind of taking our story as detribalized people and applying it to themselves. When we look at the entirety of the history and how paper G-side worked and how reclassifications work, that happened across the board amongst a lot of people. Fun fact, in case anybody know, in the 1930s, the consensus around the board for census takers was that if you were a Native American and lived on a reservation, if you were Native American and lived on a reservation in the 1930s, you were counted as Indian. But if you were a Native American and lived off reservation, they marked you as white. And so those are things that people don't recognize when they're doing their genealogy, right? Is certain reclassifications that happen. And so they take those reclassification systems and then apply it to them. While they had their own reclassifications, they were never reclassified from Native American to Negro or to African American. That was never a classification that occurred. Now, Native Americans were reclassified as colored. There were a couple small groups that were reclassified as black. But for the most part, it wasn't the other way around. So
I think the only reclassification occurred in the state of Virginia under Walter Plecker.
no, there were several reclassifications across the Western Hemisphere. So like I said, in the 1930s, in the United States, all across the United States, if you were Native American and lived on res, they marked you down as Indian. But if you were Native American and lived off res, they marked you down as white. And we couldn't self-identify on the census until I think it was the mid 60s, early 70s when we can start identifying, or it was either the 60s or the 70s when we can start identifying what we wanted to identify with on the census. Up until that point, it was the census takers who marked us down how they wanted to mark us down. So there was a lot of reclassifications that occurred. And then if you're looking at the Spaniards reclassified almost immediately when they got here. So it's hard for people within the Latin American diaspora from the Southwest United States down, because Spain went all the way up into the Southwest United States, that were automatically reclassified to Indios and didn't put their tribes. And that started in the 1500s. So you've got several hundred years of paper G-side that occurred, and people just marking down Indios and not putting which tribes not marking down which tribes they actually came from. So there's been a lot of reclassifications, which unfortunately pretendians will take and run with it, and unfortunately twist it up to fit their narrative. But that's not exactly how reclassifications worked here. And what they're claiming, that can be easily debunked, and it has been. But they are trying to use reclassifications as a way to say that they had paper G-side too, which they did, but it was coming from the African slave trade, and how they didn't mark down their tribes, their names, or any of that. They just marked them down as cargo, as property on these slave manifestos, right? So that's why they have a hard time saying, well, we don't find any African. Well, because of paper G-side, that's why you don't find a quote unquote African person in your genealogy. And so that's where they start conflating and confusing the information.
Well, I know here we were not reclassified. I even have things I post on my family. My family was always listed as Indian.
Cool. I'm glad your family didn't get reclassified. A lot of us did.
Well, this here in North Carolina and parts of Virginia, I even have records all the way back to 1635 on my family ancestry. You know, a lot of people forget North Carolina was probably first contact.
Nope. It was actually the Southwest United States.
Actually, it was Florida, the Spanish, St. Augustine. Yeah, I know the history, I teach it. But
Okay, so then how do you not know about how the
English
Spaniards...
colonial contact.
Okay, so that's where you need to make a distinction, because the Southwest got hit in the 1500s. They were all the way up into southern Colorado by 1540.
We came in contact with the Spanish in 1547, Hernando de Soto. He wrote that in his records and journals.
Right.
My people.
And the Southwest came in contact with the Spaniards before that, because they came up from Mesoamerica and went up. And then they went across to Louisiana and to Florida. And they came up from the Caribbean to Florida. But they started off with Mesoamerica first.
And I see a lot of people talking about the lost colony, don't even know what happened. I do, but my people will never tell.
A question, were your people part of the Trailatiers?
My people?
Yeah.
No. They couldn't find us. We've been living here thousands of years. They primarily wanted to remove the Cherokee. See, people don't know the real history, just like the 1763 proclamation of King George. Why do you think they wanted to declare independence? Because they wanted all that property out there. There are a lot of things that are not being taught in schools. It's one of the things I do at a college level is teach real history, because a lot of their crimes are not put in history.
No, I agree. There's a lot of misinformation about that.
There's a lot. Yeah. So.
They still talk about Croatan and Roanoke Island. That was not a tribe. That was a Tuscarora town.
Which town? I'm sorry. Who?
When they talk about Croatan at the Lost Colony, no.
Yeah.
That was not a tribe. That was one of our Tuscarora towns.
Yeah.
And we're still here, still strong.
I'm glad that you're still here, bro.
North Carolina has the highest Native American population on the East Coast. A lot of people don't know that.
That what?
North Carolina has the highest population of Native Americans on the East Coast.
Maybe tribal Native Americans. But if you count the detribalized, that's in the Southwest in Mexico, in North America. You have the largest nation with the Dene down there. You have all the Mexican.
I have a lot of Dene friends. A lot of Native people know me for what I teach. I teach truth, not theirs.
Yeah, that's not what I was saying. I'm saying that when you look at, you have the largest Native American tribe in the United States, which is the Dene, which is in the Southwest. You also have all the detribalized Mexicans that are in the Southwest. You also have all the tribal nations that people don't consider to be Native American because they're on the southern side of the border, but they're still part of North America. You have people forget about everybody in the Southwest. So it's the highest concentration of indigenous people anywhere in the Western Hemisphere is actually in Mexico. And then it spreads up from there.
We didn't establish borders and states. We lived and traded for years. That's European.
Yes, we know that. That's why we're saying when we're talking about the highest concentration of Native Americans, people forget because of those European borders that Mexico is still part of North America. They are still Native Americans.
There's a lot of revisionist history, unfortunately, that's being told, and that is the linchpin in all of this. Even the way if the true history of America was taught, they would actually have to revisit, tell the true story of the Alamo and everything else for that matter. But it's revisionist history, the myth behind the Alamo, which has to be put to rest for the real truth to be told.
Dene are of Athabascan descent. No, Athabascan is not a descent. It's a language group. And yes, the Dene did migrate down from the north about 1,000 years ago to the southwest, around 1,000 to 1,500 years ago. So yes, Pueblo people were there long before that, but their cultural group changed when they came down to us, southwest. While their sister tribes are in Canada, they have a whole distinct culture from their sister tribes in Canada from the Southwest. Yes, I did what? What did I say? Yes, you did what? What did I, huh? The myth about the Alamo? Oh, the Alamo was fought over slavery. It wasn't fought over Texans wanted to be independent in America. It was fought over slavery.
In an earlier conversation, I heard someone speaking about natives being slaves.
We were.
I know we were because they sold over 1,000 of my Tuscarora people after the Tuscarora War.
Yep.
Into slavery.
I read somewhere that the indigenous population were enslaved, that some were shipped away to the Caribbeans, if I'm not mistaken. They
were shipped everywhere, including Europe.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
They went to Europe. They went to a lot where back and forth into the Caribbean, because their thing was when they realized that they couldn't really enslave us in our own lands because we knew how to escape and hide and run away and go. So they had to remove them from their homelands and then take them to other places like the Caribbean and then obviously to Europe and stuff like that. But they did that to remove them so that they wouldn't recognize their lands and they wouldn't know where to go. Then they had the problem of disease that occurred. And so then they needed to bring in Africans after that to take up the labor force because they couldn't keep us as a labor force. That didn't stop the enslavement that occurred because the enslavement in the Southwest continued all the way up until the Civil War, pretty much, of natives.
Somebody's asking the question why natives always say they own slaves, never say they were slaves.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, only the 5 civilized tribes practice slavery.
Okay. We got to be careful with that history, because while the 5 civilized did practice chattel slavery, again, this is where the Southwest slavery gets pushed under the rug. It's an ugly history, but yes, due to the Spaniards making bad deals, and due to the Spaniards basically forcing other native tribes to do dirty work. In the Southwest, there were tribes that participated in the capturing and of native children and then selling them off to the Spaniards in order for the Spaniards to leave their tribes alone. So that did occur. We can't sugarcoat those kind of histories. Other tribes did participate in doing that as well when it came to our own people. But when it came to the enslavement of Africans, the 5 civilized tribes did participate in that. But there was also nuance in that because some of the tribes did actually split up because they had internal wars and disagreements and arguments about slavery. So not everybody within the 5 tribes actually agreed with it, and they had their own fights within them too. So that's a lot of, a lot of history that people don't talk about the nuance of that history. So we got to be very careful with the history that we tell, because we can't, if we're going to tell the good, the bad, and the ugly, we have to tell the good, the bad, and the ugly about everybody. Now, pre-contact, we didn't have chattel slavery here. We had what was called like a kinship slavery or indentured servitude. And that was if you were a prisoner of war or if you committed some kind of crime, what would be considered a crime or whatnot. And then you would have to pay your debt to society, and then you would be released. But there was no such thing as keeping people enslaved for generations, keeping children enslaved that had families enslaved, none of that. That didn't occur pre-contact at all.
Somebody wants me to explain my name. Break down my name, please. My name was given to me at birth during a traditional ceremony, Ganasqueta, in Masquerure language. It means in English, he who captures. Yes, it's on all my IDs, my birth certificate, everything. Even on my military retirement ID.
What service did you serve in?
United States Army.
Oh, what was your MOS?
Back then, when I first enlisted, it was 11 Victor. That designation has changed.
Was that what was the 11? What did it entail?
11 Victors are U.S. Army Rangers.
Okay. Yeah, I had a comfortable, pretty much 91. That was a 91 Delta in the 90s. But I was only a reservist, so I don't consider myself to be all the way in, like a range or anything like that for that matter. But I was a OR technician, operating room tech, so I'd have probably been in a MASH unit.
Oh, some of you guys were deployed with us.
Oh yeah? Okay.
I was an Air Force medic. What?
Yeah, we had medics deployed with us also. We had the capability to be anywhere on this planet within 18 hours.
Shaya wanted me to explain how the Alamo was fought over slavery. So I can explain that.
He who captures plantation owner? Wow, they really coming at it with the stuff, huh?
Huh?
Somebody wants to make fun of my name.
That is stupid right there. That's so disrespectful. Unfortunately,
my name has nothing to do with slavery or plantation or anything like that. My name has to do with the fierceness of my enemies. We didn't always kill our enemies. Sometimes we counted coup on our enemies. Some people don't know what that means. When a warrior faced another warrior to honor him, instead of with death, he let him know that he could kill him. So he would reach out and touch him.
And I just want to add, it's not funny. Even if nothing can be disrespectful and funny at the same time. It's disrespectful, period.
We get people like this that come in here on the lives and want to play with our traditional names and our culture and everything like that. But you see, me being a native elder and tribal leader, I never disrespect anyone.
I'll say this: if you made a joke and it's taken as an insult, then it's not a joke to that person. So don't
never disrespect someone's name. It's an insult. It's not a joke.
So my point is that you can't justify you thinking it as a joke when it's an insult to somebody else. But Shea is a white person, so let's school Shea real quick. So since you don't like your people's history, we'll go into it. All right, so we can go all the way back into when Mexico fought against Spain to gain their independence. The criollos, which were the Spaniards that were already born here and lived here, they wanted to gain independence from the crown because they didn't want the crown telling them what to do. Like, for example, not participate in slavery. So they decided to win their independence from the crown so that way they can control over here. After Mexico won independence from Spain, we had the first Afro-Indigenous president in the Western Hemisphere, or well, at least in North America, which was Vicente Guerrero, who was the second president of Mexico at the time, and he abolished slavery in Mexico. When he abolished slavery, he also made it very clear that those who were enslaved in the United States were free to come to Mexico, and they would not be sent back. They would gain their freedom by coming through the Southern Underground Railroad to Mexico. Because of that, Steve Austin, he decided to move into Texas right after Mexico gained independence, and he decided that it was ripe for the picking. It was good cotton picking fields out there. So he wanted to bring all his African slaves, and he did. And Mexico said, you can't have slaves. We've abolished slavery. So Steve Austin and all his cronies got pissed off and said, well, we don't care. We're not going to follow your laws. Sound familiar? We're not going to follow your laws in your country. You can't tell us what to do. So that then led to them trying to gain independence, which then led up to the Alamo. The Alamo was literally fought because Steve Austin and the rest of his cronies did not want to abolish slavery. They wanted to keep their slaves. When we decimated the Alamo, then it led into more battles, which then led to Texas seceding from Mexico. They stayed a weird random country for 10 years. And while they were considered a country, by definition, they didn't have any kind of monetary system. They had to consistently borrow money from the United States. They had a president, a vice president, but they didn't really have no established full government. And they really weren't as independent as people claim they were. So when the United States then turned around and said, we're going to enter Texas into the Union and annex them into the Union, they did that when it was still belonging to Mexico. So they literally stole Texas and then told Mexico, if you want Texas back, you got to fight for it, which then initiated the Mexican-American War, which then initiated the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which pushed their manifest destiny, and they were able to move westward. So yes, the Alamo absolutely had everything to do with slavery, and that also escalated to the Civil War because now you had all of these states that were Mexican territory, now United States territory, that had indigenous and African people who are now free people. Now they had to figure out how to re-enslave them. So that's where the discussions started getting heated amongst the North and the South, because they were trying to figure out how slavery was going to work in the West. Well, that then escalated into more talks about slavery in the South, which then escalated into the Civil War. So please know your history. If you don't know your history, then don't speak on it, especially as a European squatter, because that's what you guys are. You were the first illegal people here. Any questions, concerns?
Yeah, you know, he has enough followers that he could probably come up if he really wants to discuss.
Wants to debate?
He can, you know, invite him up. Shea Daniels, you come on up.
Yeah, you're not gonna outdo me on the history of the Southwest, because I'm very, very well versed in that history. We know that you guys got taught the whitewash version. As a matter of fact, I live in San Antonio and I've been to the Alamo, and the Alamo does not. The Alamo has a very whitewashed history inside the Alamo, and as activists have tried to get the truth of that history put out, the Texas legislators here have shut it down every single time. They actually had a book signing and they were talking about the book on the actual real history of the Alamo, and the Texas officials shut that down. Literally, because they don't want Texans to know the truth of the Alamo. They want them to think that there was this, they were fighting their independence from a dictator in Mexico, and that's not what it was at all.
The French and Indian Wars. Who's asking that question?
So
It actually occurred here in the Northeast with my Six Nations people. No, nobody asking that question.
I never said the Alamo was the first battle of Texas independence. I said it was fought over slavery. Learn to listen. Let me give you my spiel on how to clean your ears. If you go to the store and get you some normal saline, which is basically salt water, and some peroxide, mix it together, then get a syringe and squirt that in your ear, it'll break up all of that wax. And when you break up all that wax, it allows you to hear a lot clearer. Go try that and then come back. Okay? Okay.
Right?
You describe Texas
If
history.
you hit him with way too many facts, he's just like, that's
Only
crazy.
white people fought for Texas independence. Actually, no, there were a lot of detribalized Mexican natives that also fought in that. And they fought for the wrong side in that because they wanted to, again, have their own independence. Now, Santa Anna was a dictator. I won't sugarcoat that. He was a dictator. He was an asshole. But Santa Anna was a weirdo because he fought for whatever side he thought he could win in. So he was a Spaniard who initially fought for the Spanish during the Spanish-Mexican War. And then when the Spanish were losing, he switched sides and started fighting for the Mexican side. Then he held office several different times and was a dictator 11 of like the 16 times he held office or something like that. It was weird. And he would get office and he would lose office. He would get office. So he was a dictator because he was a criollo. He was a Spaniard that was born here. So he was a problem. But one thing that about him was that he was not in favor of slavery, which is why he also pushed for the fact that enslaved Africans that came into Mexico, which was part of Texas at the time, or Texas was part of Mexico at the time, that anybody that came into Texas, which is why Steve Austin got pissed off, because now his slaves that he brought over into Texas were now considered free people. And he didn't want that. He wanted to make money off of cotton. I don't know if he was a Freemason or not. I just know that he switched sides whenever it was convenient for him to switch sides.
Wasn't Austin the slave master who slaughtered his own slaves after he found out that they could be freed? Was that him?
I don't know if he did do that, but what he did was he tried to make a loophole that instead of calling them slaves, he was calling them indentured servants. However, the indentured servitude clause that he had made was more so of they owe us this huge debt that may have to be paid for several generations type of deal. But we're not going to call them slaves. We're going to call them indentured servants.
I'm gonna drop. I want to just check something out, but this is a great conversation. If you're still up, I'd like to come back. I appreciate it. Okay.
Of
But
course.
I need to check something out. Okay. All right. I'm hoping that I can bring something else to the conversation, but I want to check something.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he did slot. He probably did. I mean, they were cool people, but as far as mass, I don't know. I couldn't speak to that. But I do know that he did try to reclassify them as indentured servants, which didn't work. It didn't work.
All right. Well, I'm going to come back. I just want to check something. Okay.
Yeah, most definitely.
All right. No problem.
But yeah, but that's the history of that, and it can be looked up anywhere. A good book to read is Forget the Alamo. That's a very good book to read. Another good book to read on the indigenous slavery to Europe is On Savage Shores, if people want to read that. Another good book to read to understand the G-side that happened here is American Holocaust. That's another good book to read. So yeah, there's a lot of actual good books out there that describe the real history and not the whitewashed version of history. I'll look it up to see. Yeah, like I said, if he was a Freemason, I mean, at the end of the day, it really didn't matter whether he is a Freemason or not. I mean, I'll look it up though. I just know that Santa Ana was very much, he played whatever side that he could win on. He did that quite often. He switched sides whenever it was convenient for him. He is not the hero. He was an antagonist, but he did not believe in slavery. I will say that he was against slavery. So, plus he liked to be a dictator, so it boosted his ego, to go